Thanks for checking out the DCAU Review YouTube page, aka the DCAU Tube. Before we get to today's episode, don't forget you can subscribe to us on your favorite podcast app. You can also check us out at DCAUreview.com for the entire library of archives of every DCAU Review episode to date, including bonus episodes and being able to sort by your favorite villains, best and worst episodes, and entire scorecards for each and every episode. New episodes of the DCAU Review debut every Saturday at 10 a.m., 9 Central, on your favorite podcasting app, DCAU.com. Welcome, everybody, to episode number 22 of the DCAU Review. That's right, two today. And it's not a Two-Face story that we're talking about today, no, but it is a great one. I'm your host, Cal. Along with me, as always, my brother, friend, and co-host, also the DCAU Twitter guru. That's right, it's Liam. Liam, welcome to episode 22 of the DCAU Review.
This is an exciting one for us. When it's been on the horizon for a few weeks now that we've been recording these, when we got back into Batman, we knew it was coming up. You're always curious, both the great ones, we've been kind of surprised by certain episodes of Batman and Superman, kind of going back to them and liking them a bit more than we remembered. But less. But the ones that you remember loving, you're always a little concerned, and maybe part of that is my PTSD from Brave New Metropolis. But going back to ones that you know are great, and obviously, we're talking about Heart of Ice, everybody, by the way. Right. It's an Emmy Award-winning story written by Paul Dini. Yep. It's an episode everybody who's ever seen this show knows about. They know how important it was. It completely changed the Mr. Freeze character. It was completely unique to anything that's ever been done in superhero animation up to that point.
Certainly.
It's incredible.
Yeah, Liam, we are very excited about this episode. It is going to be awesome. And here's the thing. I am a bit of a contrarian, okay? Naturally, sure. I tend to think what's popular, there's a term for that. They call them hipsters, I liked things before they were cool or whatever. But also the contrarian in me, this episode is consistently number one or number two on most people's lists of the Batman animated series. If you go back and look at a lot of the ones, the reviews from last year when it was the 25th anniversary, Heart of Ice was either one or two on most lists. So part of me going into this episode, I was like, all right, well, I got to look through this through really critical eyes and I'm going to point out all the flaws. I'm going to prove that this is not even top 5, like maybe top 10, but there's some this, as we'll soon discover, is a phenomenal piece of art.
Yeah. And that's what it is.
It is done so incredibly well. Kudos to Paul Dini, man. That guy, if that guy just could not write... He wrote this entire episode. Yep. It was directed by Bruce Timm, but man, that guy, what a skill to be able to take this character of Mr. Freeze, he was a joke in the 60s Batman. He was... what did you say before we went on the air? He was Firefly with ice.
Basically, yeah. He's that level of guy. He was,
he was like B, C, D list.
Yeah.
And there were a couple different incarnations of him in the comics, but nothing that ever kind of... This really elevated his place in the Rogues Gallery to the point of even... they took this version of his storyline, and say what you want about Batman and Robin being not in the... upper echelon of Batman live-action movies, but they liked his origin story so much in this that they adopted it into that movie as well. So that kind of became canon in the comics for his origin story. So let's jump into plot, because I'm super excited to get into this, Liam. This is going to be a landmark episode. We're just gonna share that with the listeners. This is fantastic. So we talked a little bit. The plot revolves around Victor Freeze, and when you start the episode, it's just fantastic. So we notice the title card itself is animated. Usually they're painted. This title card is animated. It's got the text overlay, and then slowly pans down into this figure, which you soon learn is a snow globe. And then Freeze is narrating, talking to the snow globe, and then they pan to him. And I'm getting into visuals and animation already, but I'm just so excited about this episode.
The whole package,
it's so
as
great.
We'll get to, is pretty great. But
all right, go back to the plot. I can't even talk about it.
That's fine. So plot, it's tremendous. I gave it 10 out of 10.
Yes!
There's a sound effect for it. It's tremendous. It's in some ways it's kind of simple. It's a man who was wronged in a unbelievably violent way by this corporate entity. They start the episode after sort of the, no pun intended, cold open with Mr. Freeze. Boom!
First ice pun of the day, yes.
And it goes to this news report about like this guy Ferris Boyle, who is like he's this great CEO of this company Goth Corp, and they're the People's Company is their tagline.
We learn later on that he's earning a humanitarian award for all his humanitarian efforts, and you can tell there's an interaction between him and Bruce. Bruce sees right through the BS.
Yeah, that's a nice little bit that I don't think a lot of people remember, but that like this guy Boyle, which also adds to you being able to empathize with Mr. Freeze's plight when you find out later that Boyle basically killed his wife or tried to.
Right.
Did not care enough because all he cared about was money, and Freeze's research was costing him money, it wasn't making him any money. So he demanded he pull the plug on it right that second, and it appears at this point in the series that it killed Nora Freeze.
And created Victor Freeze to be Mr. Freeze.
Exactly. So this one man's selfish greed, while on the other side he's portraying himself to be this great, he's the good billionaire. You know, he's...
That doesn't ring true.
Yeah, that's sort of there. There's a little bit of real world. Some of these plot points are evergreen, but yes. So you add that layer of this guy who has this public persona. He's very popular. He's very well liked in the community. He's giving nice speeches. You mentioned getting this humanitarian award where Freeze finally confronts him near the end of the episode. So you already, like, you hate the guy, but you also understand that murder isn't how that should happen.
Sure.
And there's a talk at the end of the difference between vengeance and justice that Batman notes.
It's so...
which is incredibly poignant. That's a great Batman moment, too, because so much of Batman is fueled by vengeance in his own way, but he has certain lines that he refuses to cross.
The balance of justice being there is what...
Correct.
What evens the character. It makes the character different from the Punisher or Red Hood or any of those other characters in the comics that don't have that limit.
Absolutely. So, like I said, I gave Plot 10 out of 10. It's tremendous. It's a revenge story, but it's anything but simple. But all of the motivations are very easy to understand. You understand why Batman has to stop this guy, even though he knows that like the guy has it coming.
Right.
But he knows he can't let Mr. Freeze do it.
Absolutely. And as we already mentioned, this is an Emmy Award-winning episode. Everybody loves this episode, so we're not really doing anything other than rehashing what people have already probably said about this for 26 years. But the ability, and we talk about it constantly on this podcast, but the ability to market yourself as a children's cartoon, but still not cut one audience out, so you know that there are adults watching this. Like with last week's episode, I've got Batman in My Basement, completely and totally geared towards children.
Absolutely,
you kind of alienate your adult. That's why we didn't like it. I mean, it was fine.
Right,
we didn't hate it, but it just wasn't. It was fine. But this is an episode, like you said, it is written to the point where it is very simple. It is a guy who's trying to get revenge on somebody. He's also a bad guy. He's stealing items. Batman has a couple interactions with him, but it's layered to the point where as an adult, you can see that it's like, man, like maybe, he shouldn't be stealing this equipment, and maybe he shouldn't be killing this guy.
Right.
But man, can I relate to that guy? And when you're a child, you're like, oh, Batman gets to beat up Mr. Freeze. Oh,
right. And
Mr. Freeze turned bad. Like maybe you miss that particular plot point, but it's so layered so deep. Liam, I also gave this 10 out of 10. Yeah.
Awesome.
All right. So anything else? I don't think there was anything else. It's a perfect.
As far as the story goes, I mean, you can't say much higher than it won an Emmy, but it's some of Paul Dini's finest work. Obviously, he has tons of episodes under his belt. He was part of the story for Mask of the Phantasm, which, of course, if you've listened back, if you haven't, go back and listen to it.
I think it's episode 8.
It is, and but he was obviously part of the team that wrote that as well. So he's a legend. He's a Mount Rushmore for the DCAU, and This is him at his best. It's him understanding who Batman is, while also just, oh, by the way, redefining a character like Mr. Freeze for an entire forever. Yeah, like forever his fingerprints will be on Mr. Freeze.
Absolutely. All right, let's move on to music. Liam, I got to tell you, Mr. Freeze's theme song, when you would think of a villain like Mr. Freeze, it would be hard, I think it would be easy, rather, to give him a heavy rock theme or something, because he's this robotic sort of, villain. He talks about how his suit his circuitry gives him 3 times the strength, and he talks with a robotic sound effect to his voice. But in order to make this character relatable and show empathy towards him, they give him this soft, like, I don't know if it's xylophone or it's like triangle or something that they use.
Light strings.
Very light strings, very some dings here and there. I think maybe they're bells. But whatever they're playing, I'm not a musician. What do I know? I'm not a classically trained musician. But it's done so well that it gives you that feeling of, oh, it's a tragedy. This guy's life is a tragedy. All he wanted to do was to fix his wife, to help heal his wife, or to give her a chance to live, even if he wasn't going to be able to heal her, to give her the chance to live, and it's been ripped away from him.
And I think that comes from the advantages we talked about of the production value that went into the show to work with Shirley Walker, and like these episodes, the scores were recorded with a live orchestra, which I don't think happened a lot in animation in general.
Yeah, you think they were doing that for the Amazing Spider-Man show? Oh, get the heck out of
Right. So it's so that's again the strengths of that, and Herb and Shirley being very hands-on with the creation of the music for this show, and this obviously being a passion project for her as well as the normal creators. It's definitely one of the shining moments there. I went 8 out of 10 for music personally. It's not. I thought it could have used a little extra in a few spots. But nothing. Nothing too bad, obviously. I thought it was still very tremendous. There's a chase scene at the beginning where Batman's chasing Mr. Freeze in the Batmobile. There's a lot of nice music that adds to that, and certainly, as you mentioned, the Mr. Freeze theme, as well as some of the music during the final fight there, I think is really well done. And of course, you get a little bit of the classic Batman theme, which is always welcome when it's used correctly, and this is an example of that. So yeah, I went 8 out of 10. What about you?
I gave it 10 out of 10, Liam.
Wow.
Yes, that's right. I think that there's you mentioned, I think, the chase scene where Batman's initially pursuing them after they break into GothCorp in the second scene, and that's tremendous. That we'll get into visuals in a second about that scene. There's some great visuals in that scene too, but the music that accompanies it goes really well with it. And like I said, the fact that they chose to give him this tragic type theme as a villain, it helps create the aura of that character. It helps create that give you that extra punch to the gut. Like, oh, this guy, he's not the Joker. He's not out there because he's crazy and wants chaos. He's not Poison Ivy, who is insane because her plants died. He's all this guy wanted to do was save his wife.
First thing he said is to Batman when he first confronts him as he's trying to steal chemicals is, this is a mission of vengeance. This is a personal vendetta. Yeah. This doesn't have... He basically offers Batman a chance to just walk away.
Right.
This is a personal vendetta. It doesn't concern you.
It's my concern now.
Because he's stealing these parts so that he can create this weapon in order to kill Boyle at this humanitarian award.
Correct.
And that's the whole plot of the episode. But really good. So 10 out of 10 for that one. All right, Liam, let's move on to voice acting. We'll do that one next. So I gave voice acting 10 out of 10. Now, I will say this, though. Yes, love that sound effect. I will say this, though. We talk... why don't you tell our fine listeners at home, our key players in today's voice acting?
Well, of course, we have Kevin Conroy's Batman. We have Ephraim Zimbalist Jr. Minor role as Alfred, but some pretty great lines. A
couple snarky.
Yes. Just a reminder that he's still basically Batman's dad, and It doesn't matter if you're Batman, you're still you're still gonna deal with my snark.
Also, a little bit of Batmom too with the chicken noodle soup.
Correct.
So, which is a major plot point at the end of the episode, which is a little that's a little silly. That's how he beats him, but he's Batman, so he's very resourceful.
And there's your lesson for the kids. If revenge and murder and corporate espionage is too much to teach the kids, at least you know chicken soup's good for a cold.
Right.
At the end.
The only way to beat it.
But of course, as far as our other cast, we have Michael Ansara. Obviously his first appearance as Mr. Freeze in the series. Does tremendous work. It would be really easy, because the character is supposed to be emotionless, to make that boring, and it's not. It never is. And obviously there's a bit of an added effect to his voice, but I thought he did a tremendous job. And of course, probably the biggest and maybe the most memorable part of the voice acting, though, is a guy named, let me see if I'm pronouncing this right, Mark Hamill? Oh, Mark Hamill. Mark Hamill voices Ferris Boyle.
You almost said Bueller. I almost said that before, too. Ferris Boyle.
In this episode, the sleazy GothCorp CEO is... I think most people who listen to this probably know the story, but they had a different actor cast for the Joker originally, so they basically at the very last minute after Hamill had come in to record for Heart of Ice, figured out this guy's too good to not use on a regular basis, and decided to re-record those early episodes with his voice in the Joker's place. But
yeah, I feel like, and we talked a little bit about this before we went on, but it's a little distracting, because he's so close. You can't. I think you put it perfectly. You can't go back and unhear. And even watching this in 1992, the Joker episode came on first.
Yes,
there's been 3 Joker episodes already, and Mask of the Phantasm that we've watched.
Yeah,
but 3 that have
and World's Finest,
right? So he is the Joker, and while he isn't completely and totally Joker here, the scene where Victor Freeze gets turned into Mr. Freeze when Boyle breaks in and pulls the plug on things. There's a little bit of Joker that comes out, and you can see where they were like, "Oh gosh, this should be a guy that we have in here all the time," because he's subtly, like, sneakily evil. And then, of course, I'm sure they heard his laugh, and then they were sold on it. But regardless, it's a little distracting. But when you're looking at the performance itself, as this sleazy billionaire that is, two-faced, if you will, yeah, it works really well. He does a great performance. So that's why my score was 10 out of 10. Did you give your score?
I don't believe I have. My score, also 10 out of 10.
Wow. Liam, for those keeping track at home now, that is our 5th 10 out of 10 between the two of us. So we both had 10 out of 10 for plot. I had 10 out of 10 for music. We both had 10 out of 10 for voice acting. Yeah. We're headed towards the highest rated, I think, episode yet.
We're in that rarefied air.
And it's funny, so just a peek behind the curtain, if you will, we had discussed as to whether or not we would double up this week and do 2 episodes, because we didn't think we were going to have enough material to cover for I've got Batman in my basement. Yeah. But we both settled and said, you know what, Heart of Ice deserves its own episode. It's going to be good. Wow, is all I can say.
Yeah, good choice by us. We'll pat ourselves on the back for that.
High fives to ourselves. All right, Liam, let's move on to our final category, which is animation and visuals. So I would love to hear your take on this, because I think you've got some good stuff that you took home. So let's talk a little bit about your animation, your visuals.
Yeah, so I gave animation and visuals 10 out of 10.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's a tremendous episode. From the start of the episode, Mr. Freeze is, as you mentioned, holding the snow globe. When we first see Mr. Freeze, he's kind of in shadow. It's very much a Max Fleischer Superman, where he's painted in the background and just his mouth is animated. And at the very end of the scene, his eyes open. You see the glow of his red goggles.
Such a great visual.
It's tremendous. From there, Batman looks awesome in this episode.
He does.
And we mentioned we mentioned in the past, there's sort of a little bit of an off-model Batman, depending on, I guess, who the storyboard artist was, where the ears are a little longer and swoop back, and the nose of the cowl can be drooping down a little bit more. And you kind of have that a little bit in this episode, but for whatever reason, it doesn't seem it's not as dramatic as I think
Correct.
it is in certain other episodes. So I thought it was, I thought Batman looks cool. There's a lot of cool things Batman does in this episode, from, diving through this, diving off the top of these giant, batteries or whatever they are for the big weapon onto the guys. This is our first appearance, I believe, of the no-look punch to the thug behind you who's about to hit him.
A Batman classic.
Yes, that you'll see quite a few times throughout the DCAU. But I think even Terry gets to do that once or twice in Batman Beyond.
I'm sure. Yeah, it's a rite of passage.
Correct. So it's that you get a lot of cool Batman stuff. You also have the effects of the freeze ray itself. And that's really cool.
Yeah, I think so. That chase scene that we mentioned, it's a car chase. So you don't have a lot of car chases that I remember specifically. There's a motorcycle chase in one of the Two-Face episodes, I believe. There's some motorcycle and car chases, I'm sure, in other episodes. None that stuck out to me. Maybe in The Mechanic, I don't know.
Probably
a lot. I feel like there were a lot more in the new Batman adventures than there were. Than there were in the old animated series. But there's a great car chase, and that's animated very well. That alone could have been animated well. But then Freeze himself freezes the ground, and you get this effect of the Batmobile sliding on it, and the ice is sparkling.
Yeah,
and then it's sliding around. It's just great. And like you said, it's the freeze, it's animated, and then once it freezes, it's kind of the painted background look on things.
It's very seamless. It doesn't feel jarring.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think yeah. So now,
I guess I have to ask you, we've talked about my score. What is your score for visuals,
So my
Cal?
score for visuals and animation is 9 out of 10.
Oh.
And the reason why, and actually you reminded me of this before we started the episode, so going into the episode, the animation, there's 2 scenes, maybe I think there's 3 scenes. 3 scenes where Batman's bat symbol is reversed colored, like they used to do back in the Super Friends.
Yes, that happened like 3 times an episode in Super Friends.
Oh, and it's so distracting. The bat itself is yellow, and the area around it is black, and it's just like, come on, guys, like,
right?
Come on.
I mean, it obviously must have been like a thing they noticed too late to fix, because it's so obvious when you see it.
Right. It's bad. It's really bad. But that's the only thing. Very nitpicky. But I figured I had to be, because it's not perfect because of those 3 little hiccups. They're definitely noticeable. They're noticeable to me, so that's why I did not give this a perfect score. My only non-perfect score for this episode, it is 9 out of 10. So
I will say one more thing for visuals before we move on.
Yeah, me too, actually. Go ahead.
There's a shot at the end as Batman smashes the chicken soup thermos onto Mr. Freeze's dome and cracks it, where Mr. Freeze is just slowly crawling towards Boyle and is reaching out, and he's which is what I mentioned earlier when he starts talking about vengeance, and Batman says, "No, this will be justice."
Yep.
But the image of him, he knows he's beaten, but he's got to still try to just choke the life out of that guy who ruined his life and killed his wife. It's such great imagery.
Absolutely. That is my visual image that I wanted to. There's a scene, it's the first encounter between Batman and Freeze at GothCorp, where Batman jumps down in, he yells "freeze," and Mr. Freeze goes, "That's Mr. Freeze to you." So funny, and it's a little corny, but like you pointed out, that would be in a comic book, but it didn't feel corny. It felt legitimate. But Batman pulls out a batarang and he throws it, and they follow the batarang end over end, and then Freeze shoots the freeze gun and it freezes it, and it just stops it kind of in midair, floats, and then just
you see it break on the ground. Yeah.
It's so good. That
great
was such a great visual. But yeah, so if only they hadn't done that reverse bat signal a few times, it would have been 40 out of 40. But wait, Liam, do you hear that sound?
I do.
That sound means that somebody, at least one of us, has a bonus point. So, Liam, let me go to you first. So, right now, let's total up the score before we go to bonus points. So, your score before we go to bonus points is 38 out of 40.
Yes.
Okay. All right, and mine is 39 out of 40.
Correct.
All right. So, it's kind of like The Price is Right, where somebody bids the exact bid. We got to figure out, did somebody get the perfect bid here?
Yeah.
So let's find out, Liam. Let's hear your bonus point.
Surprise, surprise. I have got 2 bonus points this week.
2 bonus points.
That's correct. I have one for the, as I mentioned it very briefly, the voice effect, the sound effect on Mr. Freeze's voice. Mm-hmm. It's very robotic. It's very, it feels very like old sci-fi to me.
Mm-hmm. It would move me to tears if I still had tears to shed. Tonight I mean to pay back the man who ruined my life. Our lives.
Even if you have to kill everyone in the building to do it.
Think of it, Batman. To never again walk on a summer's day with a hot wind in your face and a warm hand to hold. Oh, yes, I'd kill for that.
But it adds another layer to what would already be a very good performance, as I mentioned, by Michael Ansara, as just, it adds that another layer to that, the cold, lifeless, the lack of emotion in his voice. You know, it's so perfect for that character. And again, you could take it away and it would still be real good. But that to me, again, like I said with some of the things with music, that's what set this apart. We talked about that before in earlier episodes, but this is what set these cartoons apart from any other animation, superhero animation there's ever been, was those little extra details.
Absolutely.
So that was one of my bonus points. My second bonus point...
Whoa, we brought in the old bonus point sound effect for the second one.
Whoa! Is... I haven't talked about it much the last few weeks, even though I promised I would.
Here it comes.
Hashtag Cape movement. We're back,
right.
baby.
That's right.
Batman looks awesome in this episode. I mentioned that in visuals, but specifically his cape looks awesome in this episode. There's a shot after the car chase. He jumps out of it. He throws the cape off of his shoulders. He looks awesome. There's a scene later where he's going into the records room at Goth Corp and he's just walking casually and he grabs the cape in his arm and swoops it over himself.
I know, we had to watch that one twice.
Yes, and then the scene where he jumps down from the top of the batteries or whatever, the top of the weapon, to jump down onto one of Mr. Freeze's henchmen. He throws the cape wide and jumps down. Almost looks like the shot from the opening, where he just throws the cape and jumps like hands first onto the guy. But Batman looks awesome. Hashtag cape movement, back with a vengeance.
There we go.
That... we'll talk about final scores in just a second here, but before we talk about final scores, Cal, do you have any bonus points this week?
That sound says yes, I do have bonus points.
Oh my gosh.
Week. Oh my goodness. I only have one. That's right, one bonus point. My bonus point, so initially, before we went on the air, my bonus point was just going to be talking about how great Paul Dini did in turning Mr. Freeze into a character that is legitimate. So
sure.
I think this bonus point is split into halves. Half of it goes to Paul Dini for being able to take this C-list, D-list character of Mr. Freeze, who's kind of a joker, an afterthought, and doing everything that we talked about already on this episode, making him just awesome, like just very cool, if you would say.
Woo!
Oh, another pun. But taking this guy and making him being able to empathize with this guy, feeling bad for this guy, being able to relate to this guy.
And we kind of talked about this off the air. You don't ever really feel bad for the Joker.
No, not at all.
You don't. And there's certain characters you do, like Clayface or Harley Quinn to an extent, or somebody like that. But there's plenty of Batman villains who are just kind of seem like lost causes, like the Riddler or the Joker. Mm-hmm. And so to have one that is so inherently part of the story, it's not even like, oh, we know he's a bad guy and later we find out, because they chose to make this his origin episode. We've mentioned a lot of the characters, when the villains show up, they don't do origins for him. When the Penguin shows up, he's already the Penguin.
Right.
When the Joker shows up, he's already the Joker. So doing that little extra bit to explain right out of the gate who this guy is and why his motivations are pure.
Absolutely.
I think that's bonus point worthy.
Yeah, so that's half of my bonus point.
Okay.
My other half goes to, and we would be remiss not to mention it, but all of the nods, and we talked about Mr. Mark Hamill being in this episode as Mr. Ferris Boyle, but all of the nods to my favorite Star Wars movie of all time, and that is The Empire Strikes Back. There is a slight reference to the Bacta tank that I'm showing my nerd here, but the tank that on Hoth that Luke is put into to kind of help his healing. Batman puts the villain that gets or frees his henchman that gets his legs frozen into a similar looking tank. There's also, of course, the voice modulator that Mr. Freeze represents. Very cold and pun intended. Cold, very cold and robotic, much like the villain of Darth Vader, of course.
Sure.
And then, of course, you have in one of the final scenes where he's freezing the building. There was sort of looked like a little bit of a nod to the Death Star launch when they shoot the Death Star. And then, of course, when he captures Batman in that building, he hangs Batman upside down, much like Luke did, or Luke was hung on Hoth by the Wampa.
Yes.
Man, we are just so... If you're listening to this podcast, you know about everything that I just said. So, if not, don't pretend like this is too nerdy for you. But... that gets half a point for that, because clearly they had some fun in saying, hey, we're going to cast Mark Hamill in this episode, and we're going to give a couple nods to Hoth and things that happened on Hoth too. And I love Star Wars, big Star Wars guy. So
absolutely,
my favorite movie is definitely Empire Strikes Back. So good extra point for that. So Liam,
that brings us to our final scores, doesn't it?
Our final scores, yes. When we last left our final scores, they were 39 and 38 respectively. Liam, what is your final score?
My final score, 40 out of 40.
Unbelievable. My final score, 40 out of 40.
My goodness.
We did it.
We did it, gang.
The perfect episode. That's right. I can without a doubt say this episode, if somebody wants to sit down and watch an episode and asks you they've never watched Batman the Animated Series before, I mean, we're only 14 episodes into Batman the Animated Series thus far, but this one hits number one thus far. It's the only perfect episode that we've had so
Correct.
far. And even with those little, idiosyncrasies here or there, with an animation defect here or there, or Mark Hamill kind of being out of place, it's perfect.
It's still perfect. And that's the word that comes to your mind when this comes to my mind. It obviously comes to your mind when it comes up. And yes, you can nitpick little things, but it's perfect. I enjoyed it from the very beginning. Seriously, from the opening notes of the theme to the very end. Absolutely.
It's so enjoyable. By the way, you missed the cape movement in the final scene where Batman's standing
That's
outside,
correct.
Freeze's cell. So good. Oh, man.
So much cape movement.
So much.
Hashtag cape movement.
So there's so much cape movement you couldn't talk about it all. There's so
Correct.
much you couldn't remember all of it. All right. With that, Liam, I guess we will begin to wrap things up here. Thank you for listening this week. Liam, why don't we tell all of our listeners where they can give us feedback about their thoughts on Heart of Ice?
Well, you can head to twitter.com, a free website.
That's right. No payment required.
Correct. Head to @DCAU Review. That's where you'll find us. I do most of the tweeting there. All of the tweeting, but
That's right. Liam's the Twitter guru.
But that's true. That's what they call me.
The DCAU Twitter guru. That's right.
But anyway, so you can head to @DCAU Review and tweet us any feedback you have, episodes that you think we should review next. Obviously, we're doing Batman in order. This is our 14th Batman the Animated Series episode. We also did Mask of the Phantasm. We've done some Superman that we didn't actually do in order, obviously. So if this happens to be the first episode you're listening to, definitely go back and check out our archives at DCAUreview.com. You can also find us on iTunes and on the Google Podcast app as well. I'm going to turn it around this week and ask Cal a question here. We do have a Facebook, Cal, but there's a reason we don't use it. What is it?
That is because it is run by a cold, heartless dictator, much in the same way that Victor Freeze is cold and heartless.
Yes.
And emotionless. Actually, if you've ever watched the guy that runs Facebook speak in front of Congress, you would know he has no soul.
Yeah.
He is He is absolutely cold and heartless. That, of course, being Mark Zuckerberg.
I was gonna say he was an alien, but that would be an insult to like Martian Manhunter and
Yeah, and Superman.
Cool. And Superman, obviously.
Yeah. Shira Hall, a.k.a. Hawkgirl. Yeah, they're all aliens. They're cool aliens. Mark Zuckerberg, cold and heartless. Makes you pay if you want people to be able to find you and interact with you. So we refuse to give in to his villainous demands, and we will not encourage villainous behavior. So we will not pay Mark Zuckerberg so that you can find us. You can seek us out to find us if you'd like to. You're welcome to do so. But more than likely, it's going to be quite the journey for you to find us. So just go to Twitter, okay? Just talk to us on Twitter.
Yeah, or you can leave a comment. I believe there's a comment section at DCAUreview.com.
Absolutely.
So you can always leave us a comment directly that way. But no matter what, definitely not Facebook as far as ways to interact with us.
Absolutely. All right, Liam, with that, I guess we shall wrap things up permanently here. Thank you guys for listening. I am Cal.
And I am Liam.
And we will talk to you on next week's episode.
Bye-bye.
Liam, there's no way there's going to be a better episode than this.
Not a chance.